Hey everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to the Vegas Programmers Meetup. My name is Rick Duggan. I am your guest co-host for the afternoon. Normally Josh Copeland runs this event, does a spectacular job, but he's out of town, so he's asked me to fill in for him. Today we have an awesome talk by Tyler Lemke on how to get your first job. It's going to be proven tools, techniques, networking, things to try to really be able to get that interview and get that job. Before we start, I am going to ask, does everyone understand the joke of the title, 404 Job Not Found? Okay, because if you don't, it's going to be really, really hard to get that first job. If you follow it, you are on the path already, so that is awesome. And I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and then obviously we'll leave some time at the end for questions.
All right, so you already know the title of the talk. I'll talk a little bit about why I may or may not be qualified to give this talk. Number one, I think mentorship you should use as a tool to find your own path. Never look to anyone as a god or a guru. I think it's really dangerous because they don't know your circumstances. But I do think I have a lot of good information and a lot of ways to think about how to approach the job search. I've mentored over 100 people. I've taught over 1,000 people in different settings. I've been a software developer for about 7 years, full stack. And I've done multiple different job interviews for different types, mostly small to medium businesses. This presentation is not how to land a big tech job, which is not most jobs. So like 5% or less jobs are those jobs. And so this is for normal people. I'm a normal developer. I struggle. So that's what makes me qualified. All right, let's talk about two different developers. Let's talk about Bob. So Bob is a developer that starts to do just the normal thing. And I'm probably aging myself with this reference, but Bob just keeps applying to jobs and does the normal job application thing. Who's been there before? Who's applied to okay, I kind of want to do something audience polling here. Who's applied to over 500 jobs so far? All right, 1,000 jobs? No one's at 1,000 yet, okay. Who's applied to 300? Okay, who's applied to 0? Okay, how about 100? Okay, I'm not sure which numbers I'm missing here, but maybe greater than or less than issue. But so Bob applies to 500 jobs and does the normal things, not getting any feedback, no callbacks, nothing, and decides to quit and doesn't end up becoming a developer. Michonne, on the other hand, now Michonne has a family. She's got a husband, a kid. She's got stuff she's got to do, right? So she only has about 5 hours a week to actually do the job search. So she decides to do it very effectively and uses different principles like the 80-20 rule to do things that are more effective than not. And also realizes the long-term implications of where she puts her time will also direct the trajectory of her career. And ultimately she lands a job and she's pretty good at it. So we're going to cover, this are probably like 5 talks in one. So we'll see, there's a lot of different things you can see in here. We're going to cover principles, strategy, artifacts, tactics, activities and plans, tools, and feedback. So you can see that I've actually thought about this topic just a little bit. So let's do some first principles thinking first. What is a job, right? So I was kind of thinking about this, and you might be able to break this down a little easier, but there's a need or a problem that has to be met by one party, and there's another party who can fulfill that need or problem. Bam, you have a job, right? Pretty simple. So ultimately, what do you have to do? You have to find someone that has a need, and then you have to convince them to give you the job. Right? It sounds simple, but there's lots and lots of parts and pieces to this. So let's talk about some of the principles of finding people that can help. You want to be first, right? So there's a job opening. You don't want to be number 199 to apply for that job. You want to be the first person to apply for that job. How do you do that? Right? Well, that goes into other portions, but this is just a principle. The first person, right, usually gets the job. Or at least they're likely to get an interview first, which leads to what? the job itself. How about being a friend to people? Actually networking, right? It's about relationships. So networking isn't about showing up to this meeting going, I need a job. Do you have a job? That's not networking, at least not how I think about it. Networking is about being a friend and providing values to others. And I might go deeper into that if I ever do another talk, but like I said, this is like 4 talks rolled into one, so we'll see how far we get into it. Flexibility. So if you're flexible, what does this principle kind of talk about? What do you guys think flexibility would mean within a job? I'll have some audience participation if you're feeling.
Maybe go outside of your job description. Maybe have like some extra skills outside of that.
Yeah, I love it. Anyone else?
So wear many different hats.
Sorry, can you say it a little louder?
Wear many different hats.
Many different hats. Cool. So maybe try different job descriptions, right? If you're getting stuck on things. I think those both apply. One I think about as well is, are you limiting yourself to a certain location and or industry? So the more limits you put on yourself, right, the smaller the pool for the jobs that you can actually get. Now, yep, you have one?
I also think about flexibility being that individual, that organization that has a need originally, that you may have satisfied that need, and or their need may change, right? So you need to adjust with that.
Yeah, so once you get the job, how do you keep the job, right? That kind of goes into that too. Cool. So I kind of put it on here explicitly, like go where other people won't, which is kind of about like being flexible, and do what others won't. So you got to be careful with some of these principles, right? Some things aren't going to have a good ROI, which is one we'll talk about, but like if I were in your shoes, like I don't think a lot of people want to go live in the cold of Detroit right now, right? But there's jobs there that Lisa that I've seen before, and so you have to figure out what opportunities. Like, can you go live in some rural town in the U.S. or are you going to be stuck here? And there's pros and cons to all these things, but especially if it's your first job, you might want to really consider opening up your avenues. How about number 2? Convince others to hire you. So there's a book I read a few years ago called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And I really haven't, I'll admit I'm not a top developer, but I have a lot of skills. I think that, I know what my worth is and I know where my skills are at. I'm like an average developer, but there's this principle of can you be so good at something that other people aren't, right? So if you've heard this concept of a T-shaped developer, is there some niche or thing you can do that differentiates you from other people? Being different. So are there things that you can do in your resume in the process, like on cover letters? I remember, you want to have super formal language on a cover letter, or do you want to try to be fun and funny? I've tried to be fun and funny before. Do you risk not getting the job? Yeah, you do. But if you're not getting anything anyway, who cares, right? If you're at application 500, why don't you start doing something different, right? See what you can do. Be the best is pretty much the same as the top one, so I kind of repeated that one there. But let's go over to some general principles that we have here. So you only have a limited amount of time. Who thinks they're going to live forever? No one. Cool. We act like that a lot of the time, right? Especially if you looked at Bob. Bob, I didn't really give all his background, but he's unemployed. So he had all the time in the world to try to become a sailor and all this other stuff. So he didn't limit his time and think strategically. The 80-20 rule. Who's familiar with the 80-20 rule? Okay, what does it mean? Anyone?
20% effort gives you 80% yield on the effort put into a task.
Right. It's kind of just a distribution law rule. I kind of sometimes say 5-95 for if you're talking about the basics of coding, I think you need to master the 5% of your language and not go into every single library and everything else, right? But yeah, it's this distribution rule of a small portion of what you do yields a high result. So that principle is, what are those small things that are giving you the high result? We'll go over that a little bit later when we go into feedback. You only need one job, right? I think psychologically, and this is not unique to me, like I've heard this from other people, but psychologically when we're looking for jobs, it's like we're applying to everything all at once, right? Psychologically, it feels like we need all these jobs, right? But we really just need that one job. And so by focusing in on that, you can start to be, this goes a little bit against like applying for anything and everything and going for jobs that you're more likely to get, right? And some of these principles are going to go against each other, but you have to, like, this is where feedback comes in. Like, you have to get your own feedback and figure out what's going on in your process. Life's a numbers game. What does that mean? We're in Vegas, right?
Maybe like quantitative data is very important. Like when you're looking for a job, like show quantitative data about your accomplishments.
Yeah, quantitative data, that's definitely it. Part of it is too, is like, are you, who's heard of Alex Hormozy? He's here in Vegas, right? He's kind of a guru of sorts. I don't know if he put himself that way, but he's a really good business person. He has a lot of good mental models and stuff I've learned. And he kind of just says, he started out in the fitness industry, and he kind of says, you just got to do more reps than other people. It's not that hard to be better than other people, right? You just got to work harder. But a lot of my talk is, I'm actually really lazy. I hate the job search, right? That's why I want to analyze the heck out of it and do it as simply as possible. That's why I'm a programmer, right? How can I be hyper efficient so I can do less work? But really, if you can work smart and hard, you can definitely land a job, right? It's just a matter of time. No one thing will land you a job, right? We're going to go over a lot of the different things you need, the artifacts, the skills, blah, 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 that you need. And I think we get really, something I didn't mention earlier, I think we get really stuck in the weeds on tactics and activities and tools in the job search instead of these principles. And so we kind of just flail around trying to do different things without focusing on the overall principles. And this principle lets you focus on what's like the 80-20 of it again, but I've had people ask like, what should I do for my portfolio? I'm like, well, it depends on if full stack or front end. I usually say there's portfolio templates you can go to get online. Go start with that, throw that up there, then go work on your actual project, right? Don't waste your time on a portfolio that no one may ever see. But again, that might not be the best advice because there's a lot of it depends inside of here, right? So you're gonna have to filter that through your own lens. Like I said earlier, I'm not your guru. So don't self-filter. Who's not applied to jobs before because they're like, man, I can't get that job. I'm not ready yet. Almost everybody. Okay, I've done this before. I'll give you a life lesson that I learned from this. So I went to one of my first meetups. It was in Dallas years ago when I first, it was like a React meetup in 2017. And I was doing some networking and I met a guy, and I had actually met a guy and his brother that had just gone through a boot camp. And I was networking with him, and then this individual that was hiring from like a medical company. I can't remember the exact what they exactly did, but magic trick. Okay, I can't remember exactly what they did, but he came up and I was trying to network and be like, hey, like let's get your card, like let's share cards so we can try to apply to this job. And so I was being not having a fixed mindset, but a growth mindset of I'm not competing directly with this person. The funny thing is, that guy went and applied a week before me, and he got the job. All right, I went through the process and applied afterwards. I went through the entire job process and said I would have been hired, except they closed a role. So had I applied earlier and not sat and went, man, this guy's not going to give me the job, and done what the other guy did, then I would have competed. I'm really happy the other guy went and stayed there for 5 years, and it was a great job for him. So I'm not really upset about that. I'm just saying I missed an opportunity because I didn't go and act immediately. ROI, what's the return on investment of everything you do? So what's the ROI of applying to a job and going through getting filtered out? Does anyone know about you? Anyone know your name? How much time does it take for a normal job? Has anyone actually tracked that? I don't have a lot of metrics right now. I wish I did, but I'm not currently looking for a job at all. But Has anyone tracked how long it takes per a job to apply or guess?
I try to limit myself to 30 minutes, but I found myself doing like 2 hours on an application before.
2 hours? Yeah, so let's guess it's 30 minutes per application or something like that. Depends on if it's easy apply, right? And then 5,000 other people are applying. So that 30 minutes, like, yeah, the first 20 hours that you go and apply, you get better at it, right? You kind of know what to do. But after that, you get diminishing returns, right? The law of diminishing returns kicks in. Now you're not really getting better at applying to jobs. And the ROI on it is not very good. How about networking, right? Who's ever made a lifelong friend networking before? Okay, a lot of people, right? So what's the ROI of networking? Showing up to this meeting tonight. Sometimes it's zero. I'll tell you, I show up in network sometimes, I feel like crap afterwards. I don't really meet anyone interesting. I'm probably the most disinteresting person in the room, right, at some of these meetings, but you know, things just don't click and you kind of expect it, and that's the law of numbers, right? We go back to that principle and then you remember that and you're like, oh, I just gotta keep showing up to these. So think about the ROI of what you're doing. And also do fun stuff. Don't get burned out, right? You burn out, you're toast. All right, this is a diagram I've kind of come up with for the 3 main strategies that I can think of for getting jobs. So one is sweat equity, right? You've all done that, right? Just straight up applying to jobs. That's kind of what most people know about. We also have social skills and then technical skills, and I broke down a bunch of different stuff in here. I don't know if we have a ton of time to go into every one, but I don't know how, I've heard this statistic multiple times, I don't have anything to back it up, but like 75% of jobs basically are landed through word of mouth or some sort of networking. I don't think it's as much in the tech field because there's not enough people in tech, but let's say it's even 50% of jobs are landed through networking. If you're spending, 75% of your time applying to jobs and only 25% of your time networking, and 50% of jobs are landed through networking, are you using a good ratio of your time? Right? So who's spending most of their time just applying to jobs right now? Right? Probably most of us, right? That's easy to do. Why would you not want to network? Why are you not putting more time into networking? Anyone have has anyone thought about that? Yeah, up here.
I have an interesting concept about it. So sometimes I almost worry about being too concerned about outcomes. Instead of just being focused on developing a relationship with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, we got a ton of stuff to go over about. I would probably answer that at the end if you want to talk more about networking stuff specifically. You, sir?
I would say I don't do it
Because people bite?
Yeah.
How hard do they bite? You lost a limb yet? Hold up your fingers. Let's see. They're still there, so they must not bite that hard. Okay. I like it though. So there's something psychological, I think, too. There's kind of this principle. Who's ever started a business before? Anyone? Even just want to try to start something? The easiest thing to do is go make your business cards on your website, right? Potentially, or just do other legal stuff. The hard part's actually marketing, right? You bring that analogy over to job search. What is that now? The hard part is either going for job searches or networking directly, right? And what's more effective? We kind of talked about that already. So there's some technical skill stuff. This is kind of hard to read, and I don't have these links on my slide deck, but there's ways let's say that you are part of the strategy has to play into, do you know what your strengths are as a person? Right, like I said, I know what my strengths are. There's something called the VIA survey, which lets you know what your character strengths are. There's also this Clifton Strengths Finder. I highly recommend using those to gain confidence, which is part of the skills. But if you know, hey, I'm really technical, I'm really good at this stuff, but my social skills are lacking, then go lean heavily into the technical portion. I'm over here, right? That's why I'm giving this presentation today, right? People that present usually have better social skills, generally speaking. But I'm more in this side. So it's hey, I'm gonna go to meetups. And you all are probably more, we're missing the people that aren't here, right? That are super not social. They need to be here to learn a lot of this, but Maybe they need to lean over into there. You can just say, hey, I'm not really good at either of these, and I need to just do sweat equity. I don't actually recommend just doing one. I recommend doing a multi-vector attack. Who's heard of attack vectors before in security, right? Just means different angles that you can get into like a building. So you could be like, oh, the front door, the back door, right? You could get through the roof, you could get through this, you could get through that. The plan here is like if you have lots of different strategies and or tactics to try to get jobs, you could fail at 8 of them and 1 succeeds, right? So that's some of the different ways that you can approach these. And I don't know if we have time to go through all these. We'll talk about a few strategies in the social skills area. Technical skills, you just have to like go grind out tons of time coding, right? So, and we all know about how to apply to jobs. Okay, let's talk about some of the artifacts. Get lots of questions about these. Who loves to ask a question about these? Anyone? I know y'all do. Come on, you guys are lying. Everyone loves to ask questions like, what's my resume supposed to look like, right? It's the most important thing. No one thing gets you a job. Your resume, no one looks at your resume and goes, you're hired, amazing. Who's had that happen? No one? Okay, cool. How about your portfolio? Who's been hired off your portfolio? You might be, if you have?
Yeah.
Cool. Did you build something cool?
Yeah, well, actually, one of a really large program I wrote when I first got my career started, it actually was a big way that I got in.
Okay. Did you have real users that used it and stuff, or?
It was for a TPA, a third-party administrator, and the software essentially allowed them to substantiate healthcare claims, and it actually saved the company like a tremendous amount of time and actually kept them away from bankruptcy.
Yeah, so this is one of the things sorry, go ahead.
I think that was like, but you were talking earlier about like, networking and different things about services, but like, there was one of the things you listed earlier, something about like having one key thing, I guess you could say. I don't think it's a bad thing not to have one key thing on your resume, something very unique like that you did.
Yeah, you could have that, but this is another thing, like, really it's just, if we go back to that first principles of things, like, hey, I have a need, can you provide value? And what you did is you actually provided real world value versus just building some random tutorial app that no one cares about.
Because I feel the same way, like when you're talking about having a business and finding a job, they both have the same thing in common. It's going to require the fact that you're going to have networking, you're going to have to be there and be the first available to that person and also provide them services. But the most important thing is that whatever job that you do acquire, or if you have a business that you supply service, you also have to realize that you have to supply that person with a return on their investment for what they pay you. I think that's a big key thing to focus on too.
Yeah, how are we doing on time here? I might have to rip through some of these. So like I said, this is like 4 different things in one. I think the principle that I probably should have listed was what you get paid in life largely reflects of the value that you provide to society. Right? Not perfect. It's not 1-to-1. There's people who get away with like stealing and cheating, right? But it largely is true. So there's a bunch of different artifacts you have. Again, I don't think any one of these things necessarily will get you a job. They could if you can provide value, but it also depends. Does the person seeing that thing see the value in it? This is where it gets really complicated. And this is why when you ask questions about the resume, for example, you're going to get 20 different responses from people going, well, you should move your education to the top and do this and that. And it's just like, gosh, like cool. But does it really matter? You need one job, right? So again, when you get advice from people, try to do what's called echolocation. Try to figure out, okay, what is a lot of people saying so I can know the path to take versus like taking specific advice. Okay, cool. We're getting to, here's a list of a bunch of different skills that you need for coding interviews. Am I missing any? Probably are more. Culture fit. That's kind of a behavioral thing. But yeah, that's kind of on the next one. But yeah, that's one I don't have on one of those slides. But I got a cool typo at the bottom. Take homie challenges. I don't know what that means, but it's cool. So yeah, there's lots of different skills here, right? Who feels buried in all the different things they need to do in the job search right now? Most of you, right? Well, this is why. Because there's just so many different ways you can approach things, so many different languages. And part of this is kind of like giving yourself time to like extending your time horizon can help a lot with the job search as well, right? Not putting expectations on things too early can be helpful. Yeah?
So if you're asked like to rate yourself on your Python skills, for example, do you give them a modest answer, or do you just give them a really confident answer, like no so much, or how do you?
I would go for modest, because if you say you're a 5 out of 5, they're going to rip you in half.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a junior developer, there's no way you're a 5 out of 5. Like, because if they have 20 years of experience, they probably are better than you. So they're going to start asking you really tough questions. So I'd say modest is the way to go. But if you are, this is where it gets weird. It's like, I'm too hard on myself, right? And so sometimes maybe you have to go like modest, but like one step up. So again, this all has to be personalized for you. The cool part about being modest is you can go low and then start answer, like as long as you didn't do one and start answering questions of like, actually this guy knows a lot more. And so you have that expectation bias like set in your favor. So it's a good psychology trick there. There's a bunch of more social skills and stuff. And then second order skills that you have to deal with. So there's lots and lots and lots of skills that you have to learn and or deal with. I think like one of the biggest things that's a takeaway is just to be confident in where you're at this moment in time when you go into an interview. Because you only have the value you can provide in that moment, unless you're going to BS people. And if you're going to go down that track, good luck, right? I'm not going to judge you, but like good luck going down that track, because like you have to learn really quickly if you're going to BS, right? And or you're going to get found out. But you only have the value you have at that moment during the interview. So what I found to be a really good psychological trick is just to say, look, I am where I am. And like when I walk through those doors, I'm prepared as I can be. Because being nervous in that moment is not going to help you at all. All right, so I'm going to talk about a few different tactics you can use. And as you can see, this thing's really broad. But again, if you go back to the first principles and you think of just what you need to do, you can kind of be like, okay, I just need to get one job, right? I just need to basically fulfill this need and figure out what people value, right? If I know what this company values and I align with those values, I align with being able to fulfill that, bam, you've got a match, right? It's like relationships. So, tactics. So I have a few tactics I like on here. Probably won't be able to go over them a lot, but spam connecting via LinkedIn. So I really like this tactic. So you try to find, let's say you're in a boot camp. You try to find everyone from that boot camp that's graduated ever. So you do a filter, right? And then you're going to keep track of this inside, you're going to keep track which page you're on inside of a spreadsheet or whatever. Then you're going to, you potentially filter out by a common background, which is like the boot camp or school or whatever thing it is, title, yada, yada. And you're going to connect with 20 to 30 people a day, which is the upper limit of what you can do on LinkedIn. How is that useful? Well, it kind of leads to the second tactic of informational interviews. So an informational interview allows you to, remember I talked about ROI on time? Guess how many interviews you could have a week, right? If you did 10-minute interviews, you could have 5, 6, 7 a week for 70 minutes versus all the time you're spending right now on trying to get jobs, right? And so this is kind of a list of what you can go through. A cool part I just thought of recently was doing an NPS score. So an NPS score is like a 0 out of 10, how much you would recommend, this business to someone else. You do this with the person you're connecting with. And you're saying, okay, like how much do I connect with this person, or how much did I enjoy our conversation, whatever. And I used to think I needed to follow up with everyone, right? It's because my brain's weird like that. Maybe, hopefully y'all are wired a little differently. But you don't need to follow up with everyone. Follow up with the people that you have like an NPS score of 7 or higher with. And then you can start to get more mentors, more colleagues to work with, more referrals, right? Another thing I didn't go into on here is the providing value, being grateful, and those are two biggest things. I forgot the last one. There's a whole, like I said, I might do another talk on specifically networking stuff in the future, but providing value and being grateful is probably the two biggest things you want to do when you network, right? So think about like, what does this person need, right? And this kind of goes into the last one is I've actually reached out to people and say, hey, I want to know more about your business. Can I talk to you the company you work at, can I talk to you for 10 minutes? I want to see if it's a good fit for me. And your actual thing is, hey, I want to get a referral from this person. But you do want to know that you're not going to some toxic hellhole, right? So the next part is, I call it like the reverse referral method. So you say, hey, after your informational interview, you say, hey, I would love to give you a referral bonus. I would love to do that for you. Like, would you be interested in like, give me a referral? So now what have you done? You spin around and you said, look, I care about your needs more than my own. And in fact, I'm going to I want to give you that bonus. I actually care about the other person, right? And think of like, hey, do you get anything out of this? Right? So kind of reverse those roles so you can get in that mindset. Activity and plans. So there's lots of activities that will come from these tactics, etc.
About 10 minutes.
Gotcha. Will we still have time for questions or no?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So identifying different activities that you can do and actually planning those out is really helpful, right? So don't just get stuck in like, hey, I'm just doing job searches all day. Try to like vary what you're doing, right? And there's lots of stuff that you have to do because you have to up your technical skills, right? You have to go and network. You have to do all these different things in parallel, which makes the job search feel really difficult. But if you plan them out and you work on them every day, right? Or at least you block some days to do specific tasks and then other days to do different ones, that can be really effective. Here's an example of like a plan you might have. If you had like a full day where you weren't working or whatever, you could adjust accordingly. Who's heard of a sales funnel before? Okay, so I like this analogy of a sales funnel is basically like you get a bunch of leads at the top, like via ads or some other thing, and then those people start to fall off until you get some sales down at the bottom. Does that make sense? Anyone confused by that concept? It's pretty straightforward, but I think of this concept of a job funnel, where at the top, you have to get some leads, and then you have all these other steps until you get a job. I'm probably missing some on here, because every job is different, right? So all the steps are kind of weird and different. But you got to offer, you get a job at the bottom. So what's happening with a lot of people, and I didn't have it on here, but like you want to hack this sales funnel, a lot of people are just getting filtered out because all they're doing is applying to the jobs up at the top, and they're getting filtered out by the automatic systems, right? The ADRS or the ADR, what's the acronym? I can't remember. The devil incarnate, is that what it was? Okay, sorry. What's that?
ATS.
Oh, I thought.
Applicant tracking system.
Applicant tracking system, okay. So you can hack this funnel and you can start to get into your initial email by doing some of these other methods, right? So this is a really good mental model to have is like, hey, where am I getting stuck at in this process? So I had one of my mentees, he applied to 500 jobs, or I think it was 150 at that point, and he'd only gotten 2 callbacks or emails or whatever. And I said, okay, that's not very much, but once you have something, you can look at your feedback and, okay, what's different from this company to every other company you've applied to, right? So having metrics and tracking who you're applying to is important. So I started looking at it, I was like, okay, one of them is a big company, but it's kind of no one would know about that company's name, even though they have a lot of employees. So they don't have a lot of brand recognition, right? So he was like applying to a bunch of other jobs over like IBM and other big companies that you normal people would recognize. So everyone's going to gravitate towards those companies, right? So you're going to get more applications. Who thinks they're the best in 1,000 applicants? Anyone? Cool, I love the confidence. But if you were, you probably would have a job and you wouldn't be here right now, right? So, but I do love confidence, but we've got to like think differently about the feedback, right? This is the getting unstuck thing. If you're stuck right now, are you looking at your data that you have and looking at and analyzing, okay, where am I stuck in this process? Who's done that? Anyone? Cool. What have you learned?
Portfolios are pretty cool. Networking is really awesome, but I don't know. Just having demonstrating that you can do a minimum viable product to solve a real scenario in the world that could possibly come up, and then you can market that idea. I think that's I guess my metaphor is like once you can figure out your kung fu, can you display that, and then can you go from there?
Cool. Anyone else?
I mean, I think about this a little bit. I think that one of my issues would be self-filtering, like you mentioned. So, sometimes you can't self-filter too much. And then also just needing to build up my portfolio, kind of similar to what we said. So, trying to establish more like evidence, that way I have projects that people can see to demonstrate my work.
Yeah. So, awesome. But you got to figure out like another idea is like, why don't you start putting tracking like QR codes to see if people are actually hitting your freaking portfolios? I only know of like one instance or two instances of people ever looking at my portfolio in like 20 plus job applications. So that's like 10%. So again, I haven't found it to be super valuable, but again, it's going to be on a case by case basis. It depends on who's looking at you, all this other stuff. Right? So here's some job boards you can use. There's a million of them out there, but I'm very 80-20, so like I'd probably start delving out of these if I wasn't getting anything, right? But I'm not going to go to every single job board out there and waste all my time personally. But you can do you, figure out, again, get feedback and figure out what it is. Here's a lot of other tools that I find really cool. TealHQ is one of the best trackers out there that's free. Simplify Jobs will make it really easy to do the applying to jobs, make it faster. Cramp is great for behavioral front end and algorithm interviews if you want to actually practice doing it in front of someone else, getting that anxiety out. Code Wars is great for non-big tech interviews, especially on the lower levels, because if you just jump into leak code, like those don't get asked at most jobs. Just so you know, and that's because that's most of the jobs I go to. Front-end prep is great on Great Front End. It has a bunch of other resources too. Feel free to spam connect me. Thanks, everybody.
All right, so we have time for questions. I'm going to go around. I did want to make two comments. On your thing about your portfolio not getting hit, so few people put their portfolio down, or even have a portfolio, I should say, that if I see one on a resume, it automatically advances the candidate. I don't necessarily have to visit it, so just think about that.
Good to know.
The other thing was in response to, got a question here, in response to your thing earlier about like being very, whether it's outcome driven or relationship driven, I just closed a deal this week based on a relationship that I've had for longer than most people in this room have been alive. So someone I've known for 24 years gave me a referral, and that ended up turning into some business. I do consulting, so it's not a job per se, but I actually thought about it. I have a lot of terror now after this talk, because I realize I am just literally constantly interviewing for a job all the time. All right, questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Will your slides be available after the presentation? There's a lot of good stuff there that I wanted to learn.
Yeah, so you can see on my GitHub on here, I have a presentations one, and it'll be inside of 404 Job Not Found will be inside the presentations one.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was going to make a self-reference, but I didn't do that.
Guy behind you, gentlemen, behind you there.
What are your thoughts on like cover letters, especially when they're optional? Do you think they're BS for the most part, which I heard a lot of people say, or do you think they're worth coming up with a unique one for each?
I don't so to further qualify, like I haven't been on the lot of, I've done some like interviews and stuff before, but I haven't been on a lot of receiving end. But I do know that everyone thinks differently about everything. So it doesn't really matter that much what one person thinks. But I will say, if you think about the time people have, I don't see how people are spending time reading those damn things. I think they're much more important in different, like, I don't see how they're that important in our industry. But that's just my opinion. It might be wrong depending on who you're interviewing with.
So I have one. I think I'm talking to this the right way. So I was wondering, you mentioned the one job rule in the beginning, and I've been kind of splitting my time between development and design. I'm a front-end developer, and I'm also studying UX UI design, and my process is I'm thinking that will increase my chances of finding work. Do you think I'm hurting myself? Like, should I focus on one domain at a time, or do you think it's good to be diverse?
It depends on how good you are at either one of them. So one thing I was going to say is like doing a monolanguage first is like usually better. It depends on how technical you are and how fast you learn. Like for me, I get overwhelmed by multiple languages. Like I do .NET and JavaScript right now, and it's like it's hard to keep up with like do like 5+ different languages at work. So you have to think of your time and what you think is valuable. The other thing to think about here from like a perspective is going how many UX UI jobs exist versus front end or full stack jobs, depending on what you're trying to do. So it's a really hard thing to answer because it depends on how good you are compared to the rest of the job pool. So I think you need to figure out how good are you compared to the rest of the job pool, and then go, hey, am I just mediocre in both of these? And like I'm like if you find out that you're super mediocre at both of them, then yes, I think you are hurting yourself potentially.
Thank
We
you.
have one down front.
Cool, you want to pass
I
that?
can jump in.
Well, it's for the
Oh. Okay. Well, it's not necessarily a question, but I just wanted to say that I'm a startup founder here, and I'm actively looking for a Flutter developer, and I would prefer to work with someone in this Nevada ecosystem. It would be on a contract basis initially, but could develop into something further. So if any of you are Flutter developers and interested, please come talk to me.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you. I can't think of a better thing to talk about at a time
For
like
sure.
yours.
Yeah, for sure. I think she was next here.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm kind of transitioning into a career in tech from education. And I'm kind of running into the problem of, you need experience to get a job. Like all these entry-level jobs are looking for like 5 years of experience plus. And do you have any advice for kind of getting over that hurdle of getting some experience to even be considered?
Yeah, I think like everyone's going to put that on there. They don't all mean it. They're just trying to filter people off. So one thing one thing to know is you only need about 50% of, and this is different I've heard the psychology-wise for guys versus girls is a lot of females think that they need all the job requirements and guys are like, oh, I just need 50% or whatever. So you actually only need like 50%. So I don't know if you're doing the self-filtering thing of like, if they're saying, oh, you need all these years of experience and stuff, that's where I go, like personally, I don't like going and applying to mid and senior level roles if I'm a junior because it's the 80-20 rule. What's the likelihood you're going to get that job, right? But I've heard other people go, oh yeah, apply to everything and anything. It's like, okay, but 80-20 rule, like what are you going to get? So to get the experience, that's why you have to do all these other things and like actually, like something I didn't talk about is actually go and build stuff, right? I think some people had some great experiences. Build stuff that people want and fulfills a need and you can prove that. I think it was down here first and then we'll move back.
Thank you very much. I just had a question about the informational interviews. I know you said like ask great questions. I actually got a chance to talk with the developer. It was cool, it was great. And I was just asking about like his projects and everything, but he seemed kind of standoffish. I guess, is there other great questions to ask besides just like what projects they're working on?
To ask who?
Like, so let's say you get an information interview, you're talking with them, like what type of questions to ask them? Because
so a really good thing to do is ask questions that are going to incite some emotional response. So you want passion, right? So you want to get passion out of people. Be like, what do you do from your day to day? Yeah, well, I do this and that. Well, and you can get by on that too, right? If you've done that before, like, first of all, no one's going asking anyone. Like, you know what I mean? I think I've been asked once in a social setting what I do at work. Once. No one gives a crap about software developers. So you're going to ask people that they kind of get excited a lot of times. It seems like they didn't get as excited with the project stuff. Number two, is you can ask questions that say, hey, what are the highlights and lowlights of your day-to-day or projects? Like, what do you hate about work? What do you love about work, right? Start getting some emotional responses and people will light up or, start complaining. Get some response out of them. Cool, I don't know who is next, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Good information. So you get a job, right? And you're an Angular guy, but then it's an older version, and you realize you're getting behind the curve on some of the stuff, and it's like, it's a good job. It pays good. It's easy, but you feel like you're getting behind. It's a strategy I've kind of thought about is just, always be interviewing and looking for other jobs and then find another job and then just quit. I mean, it's hard to do, but any advice on that kind of stuff?
Well, I think you've already said it. Is like it's much. So there's some psychology, like who feels real, like who's had a job before and then switched jobs while they had a job, right? Who feels better in that situation when they're out of a job, right? Pretty much everybody. Okay. So number one, the psychology of that is really important, right? Because when you go into interviews, you're more confident. You're like, I don't give a damn. Right? That's what I was talking about. It's like, that's what helps me a lot. I don't say that, but that's what I think because it helps me psychologically. Now, if you're way more confident, don't project that because you're going to probably come across as an a-hole. So it's like, you got to know you. But as far as like staying on top of things, go build side projects. Like, don't let your tech stack get, like, if you're still building in like Ruby or PHP, you might want to, those are declining tech stacks, right? If you only know, some like really old Java stuff that's particular to your one job, like go learn some new skills that are hot in the market that are proven. Like I wouldn't learn. The other thing is don't chase the latest and greatest. Chase stuff that's like 3 to 5 years proven, right? Because if you chase the latest and greatest, it's a really good opportunity for burnout. Unless you just love tech stuff, that's all you do all day long. Which that's awesome. That's not me, but that's awesome if that's you. Who is next?
I have a ton of things I want to say about. Keep it short. The guy in the front row who just asked about the informational interviews. Just I guess be clear. I am not looking for my first job. I've been employed in tech for about 11 years, but I had one person reach out to me for one of these informational interviews. It was great. As soon as he started asking me specific questions, my mind immediately said, this is a spy from a different company, right? So try to keep it general. One thing that you said, think may have been interpreted wrong by me, but when you said something like, when you get to an interview, you already, like, that's all the value you're going to bring. Once you're in the interview, you have all the value that you're going to have. You said something along those lines. And I think that, when I'm hiring someone for their first job, I'm not really hiring them for their skills, right? I'm hiring them for the value that they can bring in the future. So, I mean, I get it. If you are worried about you have an interview in 10 minutes and you think, oh crap, I don't know closures that well, I need to go jump in and read about closures, that's the wrong approach. But I do think that the value you're bringing is not only technical skills.
All right, we got time for one more question.
Awesome.
Was there someone in front who was first? All right, it's all you.
Yeah.
You'll hang out for a few after?
Yeah, I can talk to people.
Yeah, come on down later.
So my question is more so for portfolio projects and getting that interview. One, like, what's a good number of how many portfolio projects you should have before applying to a junior role? And second, of those however many projects you have, what technology should be displayed? For example, you're in JavaScript and .NET. So if you're looking for a full stack role, what are some things like unit testing or state management, TypeScript? What are these different technologies that a person should incorporate into their projects to make them look better or as a more complete developer,
Yeah.
And maybe, 10 to 15 of those technologies or maybe less. What do you?
Again, you're going to ask me and you to ask every other hiring manager and they tell us something different. So personally, I have not found much value in my portfolio helping me get jobs. And maybe that's survivorship bias. Like I only got into companies because I didn't have a great portfolio. But again, it's like a lot of the, once you have like so for your first job, right? Once you have a job, it's like most people don't have any portfolio at all. That's why they have referrals and references and they can prove it in the interview. But when you're trying to get your first job, it's like, well, again, what I would say as a principal is figuring out what does that company value. So when I went and got my last job, I wanted to do TDD and paired programming. And I targeted only those companies. And when I went into the interviews, I said, oh yeah, I know about this and that and the other thing. I'm really good at talking about stuff, not good at just coding it, but I come across really, really good when I talk about stuff. So that's what I was able to say, improve my worth of that way of knowing, and that's where you target companies, which is kind of one of the strategies is you do targeted companies and you know what your worth is and you align what you're good at with their company values, you're good to go. So that's what I'd say. And that's the problem is switch jobs, guess what happens? It's a moving target now that you're asking for because the next person's not going to care.
It's not a question, but just to add to what he said, I feel like one thing that helps me sometimes is to like look at some job posts for jobs that you would apply for and find what they're looking for in their requirements. You know, that might give you an idea of like what kinds of technologies to focus on.
Yeah, but it's going to be a moving target. That's the problem is you're going to go to every job post and you're going to try to create a portfolio project for every single job you go to.
Right.
All right, everybody. Thanks very much to Tyler. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks.
And he'll be hanging out for a few minutes after if you have other questions.